Donald, it is awesome to see you. You were working from your mobile studio in what country?
It is a country. It's called Alaska. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine in Alaska, he calls the lower 48 America.
That's awesome. And you shared that in a conversation we were having a little bit ago. And it's pretty funny that he was talking about when are you going back to America? And I think you thought you were in America.
Yeah, I was kind of because I wasn't sure if we were communicating. Communication is an important aspect of life, and I wasn't sure we're on the same page.
So what made you load up a trailer and an RV and I think is an F-150 or F-250? What
F-250 and a 30-foot fifth wheel.
you load up a F-250 and a 30 foot fifth wheel and decide to drive from right outside of Gainesville, Florida, right,
Yeah,
up
to
to
Alaska.
Alaska. Why?
50, yeah, 5,000 miles. So 5,000 miles up, 5,000 back, and then all the miles in between. Well, I'll tell you what my wife and I, Rosie, we were, and I think we've gone to this fair so many times, but one time we went to a fair and the theme of the fair was the Northwest or something. And Alaska was there. And Alaska had a booth, couple booth. They had some dancers, and it was really cool. And they had this one picture, a print of Denali, and it was beautiful. And it said, I think it said Alaska on the bottom. And I said, I want to go there one day. Their motto is the last frontier. And myself as a park ranger, I'm always looking for the place that nobody can find. It's just I want to go and I want to learn about it. I want to understand the people, and then I like sharing that with people. That's what rangers do. So I wanted to go to Denali, and Rosie said, or Alaska, and Rosie said, okay. So 40 years later, the time is right. So we have been planning this for 4 or 5 years, both planning logistically and financially and things like that, and just making sure all the ducks are in a row. And we took off. It's a almost a 5 month trip.
You shared a picture with me recently of one of your grandkids wearing chaps. Why was that an important picture?
Wow. Well, the reason that's important is because we have four absolutely wonderful grandkids, young adults that live with us. And that's one reason why we needed to wait till a certain time to make sure that the youngest graduates college and is, everybody's making good decisions. So when I left, I ran through, we live on 20 acres. So I ran through everything with everybody, and everybody has an assignment. My granddaughter, every month she does the filter at the house, the air filter, and my other grandson does the water filter because we have a well. So everybody has a job, but everybody learned how to start the tractor, learn how to start the generator, learn how to start the chainsaw, because we do live out. And we also have neighbors. And I tend to take care of the place. So the kids, we recently, Hurricane Debbie came through, and of course we're tracking it. And the kids sent us a picture of one of my grandsons chainsawing a tree that actually fell in the road next to my neighbor's house, and he's wearing chaps. Okay, this may sound silly, but for a young adult to listen to you, to understand how to start the chainsaw and then how to operate it effectively. But then, what 25-year-old is wearing safety gear? That usually doesn't happen. The boy had my chaps on, and he's helping a neighbor. And I don't think I discussed the chaps, and I don't think I discussed helping the neighbor, but I think it's about leadership. And your employees or whoever you are leading, they know you more than you think. They know how long you're taking a lunch break, and they know you're leaving work a little early. They know it, and they also know all the great things that you might not even tell them, but you're there. So they he saw me wearing chaps, I suppose, and wore them. I don't know. It's silly. I realized that he had gloves on, goggles. He was working it. And who knows, he could have posed for it. But that made my day.
It made my day too, because there's so much behind the story. And I'm not the kind of person who uses a chainsaw every day. In fact, we had a tree that we had to take down in the front of our house that if it had gotten so big that over time it would continue to overgrow and it would touch the house. It was a mesquite. And out here in Arizona, mesquite trees are built for the desert and they're not supposed to get a lot of water. They get monsoon water and then they grow, and they get monsoon water and then they grow. Well, when you put them in a suburban development and you continue to push water into them, they grow in a way that is not necessarily natural for them. So, a friend of mine, neighbor, their youngest and our youngest are both graduated high school and are moving on. So we're all going through these seasons of life. And he comes over to help us take down this tree. And we've got this chainsaw and a rickety ladder, and we're up there getting ready to start cutting some things down. We did not have chaps. We did not have goggles. We did not have anything other than a chainsaw, a ladder, and a mesquite tree. And the people that live across the street from us, their son-in-law, he comes over and he goes, "You guys need a little bit of help?" And I said, "Absolutely." Like, we were happy to take help. This dude got rigging gear out of his caravan,
Really?
jumped up into the tree like a spider monkey, and just starts cutting things down. And Andy and I are watching this thing happen. And we're watching it while our kids are looking at this, thinking, you guys are going to kill yourselves. And then this guy goes up there and completely cuts down the tree. That's what he does for a living. We just happened to have a guy who was across the street who saw us potentially moving into an area of danger, and he came in and he helped us out. And it's amazing what happens when you go out there and you help people out, and you've got the
Yes.
gear to help people out, and you've got the interest in looking at it and saying, hey, that's an accident that is bound to happen. And I think
Yes.
it's is out there in a pair of heavy chaps, making sure that he's doing the work the right way so that if that chainsaw moves a little bit quick, it doesn't get right into his leg. And that's because he watched you do it and demonstrate really good stuff. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome. We all want our employees and our loved ones to do the right things, but often we don't get a chance to see that. We are very aware when they screw up, right? But the day to day, boy, I hope they make the right decision today. Well, I had photo evidence of it. That's
So
cool.
let's talk a little bit about your background. How did you make money before you moved into this current thing that you're doing, which is speaking? How did you make money before speaking?
Well, I started as a park ranger, an interpretive ranger, we call them, a long time ago in 1983. It's amazing, but it's been a long time, 1983. And then I moved into a law enforcement ranger position. I was a state law enforcement officer and made more arrests than I ever wanted to do as a ranger.
Let me
I
ask a
happened to be
question before you go any deep. What's the difference between interpretive ranger and law enforcement ranger?
so That's a great question. So every agency uses the word ranger,
Okay.
whether it's a forest ranger or park ranger, and that's city, county, state, federal.
Okay.
And then within the ranks, most of the time they differentiate or specialize. So you can be a kind of the guy in charge of maintenance. He has the same uniform as providing interpretation or providing a tour. So, from a visitor aspect, it's very visitor centric. The visitor scene, and they're seeing a bunch of people in the same uniform. So you can be an interpretive ranger, law enforcement ranger, a resource manager like
Okay.
a biologist style ranger, an administrative ranger, and a lot of agencies don't always do that, but in their to use the word ranger, but that's what the visitors see. The visitors see a bunch of people in uniform, just like in any police department, just like in any office setting. You look like office workers, but reality, there's probably 15 different jobs going on. So
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
So in so then you get special, you can specialize in one or the other, whatever is your whatever you want to do. whatever you're good at. So I'm good at speaking. That's a gift that God has given me, and I have always been aware of it. So interpretation is providing factual information within a story. Think about going to a campfire program or going to the Grand Canyon or anywhere else. There's a person in uniform providing you information. And if they just provided you the information, you can get that on the internet. You can get that from the rectangle of knowledge, which is this phone. Or if you wanted to hear a story, you can go to, YouTube and hear someone tell a story. But to weave it in and to understand, and I'm a people person. I love the environment, but I'm a people person. So I don't want to tell them the the quality of this plant or the benefit of this plant. What I like to say is back in the day, the people used this plant for three reasons. And then I sometimes add a person. So Farmer Joe would do this, or Mama Brown would do this, and it puts a person there. Mama Brown would go and she would take this berry and she would do X with the berry, and it makes it personal to them, right? So I'm telling you the benefit from Mama Brown, and I'm weaving in the science of it. So that's interpretation. I never knew. I mean, I was a cop for a couple of years at a very busy beach park, and I was a cop because of the clientele. It happened to be in the Fort Lauderdale area, and it just was one of those things. And I didn't want to be a cop; I wanted to be a park ranger. So I was actually going to work for the city because they offered me a job and it was more money.
So
And my wife,
I have to interrupt again. And this is fast. So you were a cop in Fort Lauderdale. So spring break. Well,
people come to Fort Lauderdale or come to Cozumel or go on vacation to get away from their norm. So it's just if you normally wear like clothes, then you don't wear it on vacation. Or if you normally don't over drink, then you would tend to over drink on vacation. I mean, I'm kind of being silly, but it's the truth. It's their wild side. It's their alternative, alternate ego. So yeah, things would we had some we had some serious crimes against people, and that's what mostly they were crimes against. So there's crimes against the environment, like fishing or hunting and
okay.
things like that, or pouring oil in the or just stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's what attracted me to the job. But then there's crimes against people, and that's where battery happened, assault, sexual assault, burglar. I mean, breaking and entering, B&E of a conveyance. So breaking into a car. I mean, just a lot of stuff. A lot
So
happened.
in a park environment, so is the beach considered a park in that environment? So it's not Fort Lauderdale Police Department.
Well,
It's
it
the
could
state
be.
beach. Okay, yeah,
It could be. So we had a beach called Johnny Lloyd Beach State Recreation Area. It's a 3 mile beach, but it wasn't just a beach. It's a peninsula, and it's on Port Everglades, which is a huge cruise ship port. And it's very interesting. Has a lot of history to it, an African American history that's really sad, but really cool. I mean, it's cool that it all worked out, but this beach attracts a lot of people, especially back in the day. And also, you recall in the 80s and maybe the early 90s of Miami Vice.
yeah, sure.
And Miami Vice, I mean, I know that's a fake show, but I lived it. Well, I had
I
more.
now see you in one of those. What Don Johnson wear where he had like
Yeah,
he had his sleeves kind of pulled back and you were
yeah.
driving around in the Ferrari. Is that what you lived that? That was
No,
you?
no, I had a 1979 Dodge Power Wagon 4-wheel drive. That was my truck. But we dealt with a lot of smuggling on the beach. We dealt with a lot of immigrants, Cuban immigrants, Haitian immigrants that would come to shore, and you would need to deal with that, and a lot of fights, and just a lot. So it was interesting. It was a little more, but that's just I moved 17 times in my 38-year career, and we're just at park number two.
Have you always been in Florida?
I was born in Memphis, Tennessee,
Okay.
and my parents moved our family here when I was 6. So I don't remember Tennessee at all. I only remember Florida.
Wow.
So I don't have any. I'm a Floridian. I mean, I don't have any ties or any.
Fast forward a couple of years and
Yeah.
a couple of moves.
So I
And how
moved
did you
through.
retire from?
Well, it was interesting. Rosie said, "Don't go for the police department. Why don't you be a supervisor?" And I said, "I don't want to be one of them, right? Because at that point, I only knew of a supervisor as, wasn't a, I mean, it wasn't, we didn't have a bad relationship. Actually, we had an exceptional relationship, but all the BS that goes in. And then once you're a supervisor, you spend more time in the office than you did in the field. And that's why I became a ranger. So to make a long story short, I went through every assistant manager, park manager, superintendent, assistant district manager, all the way up and retired as the director of the Florida Park Service. So not only did I challenge myself with administrative duty, I became the chief administrator, fourth down from the governor, and making huge decisions and leading an amazing group of 1,500 employees and 175 franchises is what I called them. They're parks, but they're franchises because we give them a manual of this is how we want the burger to be prepared. And when you go to each restaurant, it needs to taste the same, right? And but then also there's an element that doesn't need to be the same because every park has a personality. So we made sure that we weaved in the important things and concentrated on the important stuff. And that was consistent. For instance, customer service within all state parks in Florida.
How did you maintain that as across such a large group? Like what is that? What does that process look like?
Well, I had the luxury. I'm the only director in Florida State Park history that has been a park ranger.
Okay.
So everybody, a lot of people knew me. So they knew what I stood for. They knew that I love playing and having fun because I'm in parks and recreation, but they also knew I don't play. You know
What's
what I
the
mean?
difference?
And
What's the difference? What's the difference between the two? So you like playing, but
so
you don't play. What do you mean?
yeah, so what I mean is that we have a job to do, and I don't mind if you have fun doing it. As a matter of fact, we're going to have fun doing it, and we're going to do this together. We have a wagon to pull, and we're all hitched to it. And the value of the cargo in the wagon is way more than the personalities of us pulling it. And so we're gonna do awesome stuff, and we're gonna have fun doing it. So that's it. But if you act up, I'm not playing. I have already told you what to do. I'm done. Now I'm not done with you. I'll coach you along the way. But some with 1,500 employees, sometimes people hang a left when they don't need to, and I I will coach them and literally love them and pray for them. I'll do all sorts. I'll do anything because they're so valuable. But at some point, I've got to move on because they're dragging down the team. I'm literally dragging down the team. I'm familiar with livestock, so I have that reference. But if you do have a team of livestock or horses pulling a wagon and one of them pulls up lame, it slows down the entire team.
How so?
it it because the speed in which the team operates is indicated by the slowest member of the group because the other, let's just say it's four horses
Yep.
and one of them is just slow. And I don't mean to compare livestock with humans or anything like that. It's just an analogy. But the fourth horse that has something wrong with its hoof is gonna slow down, and it will slow down the team. Because if you think about it, you've never seen a team of four horses drag a horse. That doesn't happen, right? So they all yield and adjust to the slowest member. And I've used that as an example of when I look at teams and I look at teams and think, there's some brilliant people on this team. Why aren't they moving? What's happening? And you look into it and you find out that one person's got an attitude, or one person isn't bought in, or one person doesn't have the training, or one person doesn't have it in their heart, or one person is thinking about the problems that they have at home. All of those are legitimate life activities. And we need to take time to mend that person or help provide an opportunity to help that person. But at some point, we gotta, it needs to go out to pasture. We need to load up another horse.
It's really powerful, especially when you talk about, like, one of the things I heard as you were sharing that story is I can envision a scenario where a horse steps on something and something happens with its shoe and it now has a limp where all it needs is a new shoe to be replaced. I could also imagine another instance where that same horse stepped in a pothole and broke an ankle. And I don't care how many different shoes you're going to put on that horse is not going to operate any better. And either one of those things has a negative impact on the team, the success of the team, the other three horses that are there. And it's our job as leaders to be able to ask questions, engage, interpret, get information to help determine what is the next step. Is this one of those things where we just slow down for a little bit and we pull a thorn out, or do we actually have to replace the horse because it's just no longer the right fit inside the organization?
Yeah. I see managers sometimes where they could do better is that they don't know their staff.
Mm.
They just show up in their office or show up at the job site,
Yep.
whatever your situation is, and sit down and shut up with no agenda. Just sit down and bring a tuna fish sandwich with you. Bring one with the other person. Just get to know the person. Now, the first couple of times they're going to be suspicious because they don't know what's up. But eventually you will get to know each and everybody on the team. Because I think what we do is that we're so efficient, us humans, we're so efficient. And when we're at work, right? And we need to get stuff done, productivity. And but we don't realize that you got to grease the machine. And one way to grease the machine is to have a relationship. I'm not talking about going out on a Friday night and hanging with everybody at the pool hall, though I don't have any problem with that. I've done that as well. But I'm saying have a meaningful relationship so you can understand someone, because many times these situations aren't a part of their normal life. It's not their MO. They just threw a shoe, like you said, or they're having something go on, or their child is going to college. And now the whole family is like, what's my role? Right? What's my role as a father? What's my role as a mother? That takes time to adjust. And so we need to understand that in our roles as leaders, because I want to have the most productivity as I can, but I want to have it with the best team I can.
So you started with sitting down with a tuna fish sandwich and just kind of observing. What's next? Like, what are some of the questions that we can ask? Some leaders really struggle with understanding, hey, what are the questions I can ask? Specifically because I can get so much data out of a spreadsheet that says you showed up at this time, you left at this time, you did this many, you wrote this many tickets, or you made this many calls. And I think one of the dangers of the amount of data that we have is we start managing out of spreadsheets rather than managing people and leading people. But what are some of the things, and I see you nodding, so what are some of the things that we can do as leaders to be better leaders in this context? What are questions we can ask? How can we practically work through it?
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. Well, they say that whoever asks the question is in charge of the conversation. So it's like an interrogation, and you never want it to feel that way. So I always think that it's what you don't ask. And so sometimes it's just sharing. I think that if you share one of your vulnerabilities, then they can relate to you. So let's just say that a person is not doing exactly what they need to be doing, but I know they can for some reason. I'll share an instance in my life. I won't even mention it. I'll say, "Can I talk to you for a second?" One time, and share a story of how I got over this, and then move on. And hopefully they'll connect the dots. But I really don't want to ask any questions. I don't want to pry because I know this, because I know humans. They're not going to tell me the truth anyway, or they're not going to be open and honest, and they're not going to give me the real deep answer until we have a relationship.
See, and I tend to default to the questions, and sometimes it gets me in trouble. And one of the reasons it gets me in trouble is because it feels like that interrogation. So what I try to do in those instances is, or what I do, this is my practice, is I will say things like, "What questions do you have for me?" and open things up there so that it doesn't feel like an interrogation. Depending on tone and depending on engagement, I might share a story, or I might even ask the question, "Why do you think I asked that question? What do you think I'm looking for?" Like those kind of things. And I think there are leaders that are out there, me included, but a little bit better with it these days than I was back in the early days. Why do you believe that leaders struggle with being vulnerable?
Well, I think that as a leader, if you show vulnerability, it shows weakness,
Mm.
which is absolutely BS in my opinion. But I think that's what we are taught. And I think, especially as a guy, in my opinion, I think that the vulnerability is not anything that, we're not going to get a medal for it. I just think it's BS. I think knowing your employees is the absolute best practice you can do. And, sometimes you got to ask another employee about the other employee, like, because you don't know, or they don't won't open up. And I'm not doing the whole touchy feely, thing. I'm just saying intelligently as a manager, we have to know what we're doing. I'm pulling this camper. So I'm in my camper right now, right? So I drove 5,000 miles here, pulling it with an F-250, 3.5 ton diesel truck. So why didn't I pull it with a half-ton truck? The gas mileage would have been a lot better. The efficiency would have been a lot better. It would have been terrific. I would have saved money. However, it wouldn't have pulled it because it's the wrong truck for the job. And how do I know that? Because I know the difference between a half ton and a 3/4 ton. I understand the difference between a gas engine and a diesel engine. So I picked the right truck for the job. And the only reason why I know the right truck, because I also know the wrong truck. I know all the trucks. So I'm intimate with that enough that I can make an intelligent decision. That's why I think that vulnerability, people think it's oh my God, if I sink to my heart, I'm gonna like get sideways. I think vulnerability is where if you're vulnerable enough, your mind will just do amazing things with that information.
One of the things, at least in my experience, when I've been vulnerable with people about challenges, people have opened up more and they've been surprised by the vulnerability. I or you
Mm.
made me feel uncomfortable by you sharing that level of vulnerability. It more on the other side, it's been, hey, you're more relatable. I understand. I had no idea that you had dealt with that. You should share that more. Those kind of things. Is
Yes,
that your experience?
it is, but I do believe there's something about oversharing,
Okay.
and it's not as much as is what on your part, it's on the recipient's
Mm.
part. Because I think that we can burden people
Oh,
with some deep information. Let me give you an example.
yep.
I think I've shared with you before that one of my sons has passed, and my wife and I are in a club that I wouldn't wish on anybody, right? So recently I was talking to somebody, and I don't even know what made me think of it, but I told the person, I don't even know how, but I said, my son has passed. When I said that, this person, this big manly man, it buckled at the knees. He could not take what I was saying. And I said, I am so sorry to burden you with that. And I wish I could take it back because the pain or the story is too much. Now that's an extreme. That's an extreme, right? But I think that we can share too much. Not that we don't deserve to, and not that we don't have the right to, and it's our feelings and we should 100%, but it's to the right person. I wouldn't put a seed in sand. I would find some good soil to put the seed in. And because that's my responsibility. My responsibility to that tree or that information, it's my responsibility to put it in the right spot. It's for that person to accept it. And also that means the storytelling part is that where are they, and knowing them. So if they're an equestrian, I'll add an equestrian thing in it. If they're a race car driver, I'll add a NASCAR reference to it, because I want them to get the information the way they can receive it. The better it tastes to them, the more they're going to swallow it.
And I think that's one of the things that is really powerful in the conversations I've had with you and conversations I've had with Jody Mayberry, who's was the host of the podcast and helped us get this thing started, also a park ranger, around interpretation and story, because that is something that I struggle with. I tend to go right into the process, right into the tools, right into the nuts. Let's identify what we're going to do. Next logical steps, we're going to start taking them. And there's a context piece that sometimes gets lost. So what I will typically try to do is get an understanding of, hey, like, what do you do when you're having fun? So if I know that you like watching people back boats onto a boat ramp for fun, or I know that you like to wrestle gators, or I know that you like to ride bikes, or I know that you like to play golf, or I know that you have somebody who has operated a chainsaw, I can bring together a story that will connect the dots there, and rather than trying to force a story into the story. And I am working on getting better at storytelling, connecting those dots to help some of those stories start to resonate. Let's talk.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I agree. And I think that the same story could have the plot's the same or the message is the same, but the delivery's different.
Yeah.
It's what gear do you want to be in, first, second, third, fourth. It's the same thing. And someone could listen to the same story and say, oh, that's not what you said last time. I mean, this would not really happen, but maybe in their mind, well, yeah, it's not, because this person, they wouldn't understand it that way. I need to make sure that my story is palatable to them, not to me.
Let's talk a bit about your time in parks and just like what you've observed. I know that we've talked a little bit about, working in the context of 30, 60, 90-day sprints, those kind of working in the context of quarters. And one of the more interesting things you brought up is the ecosystem, the environment that people are operating in changes by week. It's not
Mhm.
4 seasons or 4 quarters or 12 months. It's 52 weeks. It might even be 365 days. What do you see in parks? Where does that come from? How does that come together? What can you share with folks around what they can observe inside a park environment and how that changes over time and the cycles repeat themselves year over year?
Yeah, I would go as far as it's the natural environment and the work environment are so similar,
How so?
because you can go into a business and as a consultant or just an observer, or I went to Dairy Queen last night, right? And so I go to Dairy Queen and I see a couple things that needed to be done. That are the guy who's serving us was awesome. I think he should be the manager, and I suspect that he will be one day. He had great attitude, knew the product. I loved it. But then there's the guy in the back, flipping rags at each other, playing the fool. So, right, you look at it and you can see. So it changes. And how does that environment change? It changes with leadership. So the reason it exists the way it is because of leadership, because someone hired these people and someone manages these people. And if you get another manager in, it changes the environment. So in business, leadership, policies, procedures, things like that can change the environment. Whereas in the natural environment, it's things like fire, floods, wind, temperature. So you add this strong element in and it changes the environment. But because I'm from Florida, people often come, oh, too bad you don't have 4 seasons, because they think of Florida as either mild winter or hot. So that would be 2 seasons, right? Because they're somewhere else and they visually can see the change. Well, when you are working in the environment, yeah, we don't have 4 seasons. We at least have 52, if not 365. When you know the woods that you're managing, when you know the tides, when you know the fish are running, when you know when the deer are going are mating, when you know these things, you know it, and it changes every single day. I could tell you where the animal's going to go because the acorns are there. I can tell you where they're not going to go because that's it's the exact same within our community. And how do we know that? Because I observe and I've learned and I understand the environment. So yes, but when a hurricane comes through, it's terrible. It's only terrible when there's humans in the way. When there's no humans in the way, the swath that it makes in the environment through the woods creates a linear ecosystem that is different from the ecosystems left and right to it. It's amazing what can grow up because there's no more trees in that area. So now all the shrubs and grasses, which are so beneficial to the plants, are going to thrive within that area. And you say to yourself, how does that happen? How does the ecosystem thrive because of the disaster? Well, let's change to back to the business. How about if someone gets fired, or someone buys your business? It looks disastrous, right? It looks like, how are we ever going to recover from this? The reality is it's going to recover, and you're going to get to be a part of it, and you're going to be able to see it. I think business environment and natural environment parallel each other so much. And I think what, in my opinion, while I was the reason why I was good with the business side of 175 franchises with 1,500 people is because I knew it, and I knew it well, just like I know the environment. I know what they need. I know what they don't need, the business, and I try to provide that. I think that's good leadership.
When you care.
The passion is, yeah, they know your subordinates know more about you than you know about them, in many times, in my experience, because they know when you're taking a break, they know when you're coming in late, they know when you're leaving early, they know when you care, right? And sometimes they can put on a front for you and you don't know, but they know it all about you.
Not all that different from raising kids. I mean, the kids are always watching. Like our youngest, actually not our youngest, our oldest. Once he first started talking, we realized how much Jen used the word "really" because he just kept parroting the word. Whenever someone would say something, he'd be like, "Really, really, really," and you just start to see this reflection. So everybody's observing. Everybody's observing. How? So tell me about that situation where you've had to deal with some conflict, a challenge that happens. So I'm driving my F-250. I've got my 30-foot fifth wheel. I'm driving in. Park closes at 6 o'clock. I show up at 6:05.
Yeah.
What happens?
Well, it is challenging. What's great is people made the policy and people open and close the gate. And so if I'm good with people, I can get into that site because you end up, I hate to say, I know people, but the people I know, I just met. I just met the guy next to me. I just met the manager. I explain it. The policy and procedures and all the other stuff, that works on a sunshiny day. But how about when the wolf's at the door, and or you have a special client that needs to be adjusted? We need to hire these employees that have enough sense to know that what is I can't steal. That's a good policy, right? I can't steal. That's great. I love that policy, right? But can I let the guy in at 6:05? Yeah. And then empower that person and know the difference between, chicken poop policy or common sense. Isn't it crazy? You have a policy that you can't steal. I mean, why do you even have that policy? What if someone really looks at it and goes, huh, then you should probably let them go. But but yeah, the 6:05 person come in. I know the guy. I know the guy because I see him right there. Sometimes it doesn't work because people are jerks. But all in all, you know, as long as you tell a good story, I think you can get in at 605. Here's another one that's even more common is I have a 30-foot site, but they don't have any 30-foot sites. I mean, I have a 30-foot rig, but they only have 25, 20-foot sites left. And that's hard, because it doesn't quite fit. But I assure them I will, get it in there, and I'll get it in a little cockeyed so we can make more room. So I need to be able to adjust to the rule as well as they need to be able to adjust to the rule. That's a good business.
To be able to do that and make in the field decisions.
Yeah, it's really hard, especially in government, because government has so many rules and regulations, and we are so, we can be regulatory heavy, and it's just because people are always looking at us, right? And so, it's we got to do it this way, and people are looking. I mean, you drive down the road. So with 1,500 employees, let's say that I had 1,000 vehicles tagged. So, with the license plate. So all you have to do is the tag numbers right there, and you call, and you can find out who's driving that truck almost within a day. You can't get away. So rules and regulations are very, very important. But I think what I have tried to do is I don't talk about the rules and regulations. I say, I expect you to follow the rules and regulations, and I focus on the mission of the business.
Okay.
And the mission of the business is to acquire, protect, and provide that. If you can fall in or make a decision based on that and tell me why you did something based on the mission, I am all about it. And I think that's what they did, and they did for years and years and years.
So, how does, I know one of the things you talk about when you're speaking in front of groups is design principles when it comes to design from a park perspective. How does mission and vision impact design? Where does it impact design? And can you talk a bit about what goes into design when thinking about things from a park perspective?
Yeah. Well, the best operated park was designed well.
How so?
No doubt. Because if you think about anything, let's just say Disney, for instance, with all their queuing, how they queue the people, and you're winding through this thing. Imagine if they didn't have that and didn't think about it. Where would those people even be? So the park I was talking about in Fort Lauderdale, we opened at 8 o'clock in the morning. And in the summertime, especially on the weekends, we would close by 10 o'clock in the morning
Oh, wow.
because we're full.
Yeah.
There's no more parking. And people would say, well, you have enough land. Why don't you build more parking spots? Well, there's something called, in our world, there's three types of carrying capacity. One carrying capacity is how many people can recreate on a given resource without messing up the resource. So think about that. Think about a trail that you like behind the house. How many people could walk on that trail every day until the trail, instead of it being a foot wide, it's 6 feet wide. And instead of seeing all sorts of flowers, there's no flowers. So there is a point in which there's too many people recreating on that particular site. So that's carry capacity. So the the parking lot should be based on how many people can recreate on that trail. And it's not thought of that, because if you have someone who designs the parking lot for a big box store, they just buy a piece of land, they build a big box store, and the rest of it's parking lot. Good luck. Here it's not, it's scientific to a point because there's some certain standards, but we want to make sure that the people here at this particular time are going to have a fantastic experience, and that's the recreational carrying capacity. So picture this trail again. How many people can recreate on that trail? So forget about the resources. How many people can recreate on that trail so they could feel like they're in the woods, or they're in the mountains, or they're on the stream alone with their family? If you have to say excuse me once or twice during your hike, that's fine. But if it's constant and you're constantly moving off the trail to let someone by, there's so many people on the trail that it doesn't, the value of that recreational experience has decreased to a point where you say to yourself, I don't even want to come back. Okay, if they say I don't want to come back, that's part of our mission. Because of improper design, you no longer are fulfilling the mission. And the third carrying capacity that we have is safety. So I recall a time, and I hate even regaling the story, so I'll just make it very brief. On Father's Day, there was a young boy who was drowning. So we get the call he's drowning. And typically when the call comes in, it's, where are you located? And they say, I'm on the beach. And I told you it's a 3 mile beach. So there's so many people on the beach that I can't drive there. I can't get to the beach. I can't get to the beach to provide the safety that they want. So, so this is a safe, so there's safety, there's recreational experience, and there's resource protection. And all three of those we have to think about all the time within providing recreational opportunities within natural areas. But I think that's the same thing as at Dairy Queen that I told you about. Is proper planning of Dairy Queen gets me in and out. I'm a happy customer. They can take my cup, right, with the blizzard, and they turn it upside down. When they do that,
Yep.
they
Oh
turn the
yeah.
blizzard down, right? It's scary when they do it because it's like I hardly go there, but I went there last night, so it's in my mind. So he turns it right. I thought the darn thing was off to go on my lap, and he's so proud of it.
Oh yeah.
All of that, right? All of that together made my experience good. And I don't know what happened in the back, but I don't care what kind of business you have, planning, planning before you opening the door is how you get it done.
There is so much to unpack in that story, and just the arc that we went through. A couple of the things that were highlighted are the importance of designing for customer experience and understanding what your conversion rates are so that you can create that experience and know where your capacity is and know how many variables you can put in place to help push yourself into that, in or out of that spectrum of risk that you're comfortable in. And we think that we're all so special. And I will tell you, you're not. Like we just talked about Dairy Queen and a beach, and the same
Yeah.
story applies. So you're not that special. But what you can do is you can be special by thinking through this process and working with your team and understanding where your capacity is. Because as much as you're going to frustrate the 101st person that's trying to get into that 100 parking lot space, how many other people downstream are you going to impact if you make an exception? If you have not been to a park recently, go and enjoy the park. Donald, you are awesome. Where can people go find out more about what you're working on and what you're sharing out there in the community?
Well, at tailgate-talks.com is my website. And I do a lot of things, and I like to be partners with people. I love to have customers and clients, but I really like to be partners. I like working with people on certain projects, and I would love to see how we can collaborate. I also have a podcast called Tailgate Talks, and it comes out mostly every week, and it's a half-hour podcast, and it's typically geared to recreation and conservation. But because of the vast responsibilities, we talk a lot about, HR issues and political issues and just things that are all about parks. And I invite you to join us on the tailgate.
We'll include links in the show notes to Tailgate Talks. And what I hope everybody takes away from this conversation is, number one, Donald's just a good guy to talk with. He's got a lot of experience. He's been able to lead an extended team across a very large amount of land that we're also supporting a lot of other mammals and reptiles and other animals that are in and about that space. And so much of the stuff that we've talked about applies to your business. And when you get out there and you get into the park, you get a chance to observe what happens in the park. And when you learn and observe the things that you see in the park from a design perspective, from a story perspective, you can take those things and bring them back into your business. And the beauty of it is they all apply because we go through seasons, both in our business from a quarterly basis, like we had talked about, or even a weekly basis, like Donald talked about. So please take this back and think differently about the work that you're doing inside your business. If you know somebody who would enjoy this podcast, share it with them. Let Donald and I know via LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter if you want to let people know there. The shares help people. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process? Thanks.